Hello, I am live. This is Holly Holiday from Holiday Advisors, and we're going to be talking about real people elected. I am so excited about this opportunity that I'm going to be doing next year. It kicks off in January, but this is just going to be a little preview. I'm doing one now, and I'm going to do one after Christmas, and then one right before the new year. So here's what this is about. Some of you who know me know that I have been involved in politics for, oh my God, at least 25 years. Okay, I don't want to date myself, but it actually is true. It's been over 25 years. And if I were really being honest, I would talk about how I started working in my first campaign back when my grandfather and my father were running for office. So I was just a real little kid, and I was the person that would be licking the envelopes when we used to have to do that before we had mail houses, and putting actual postage stamps on before we had meters, and taking those big basket of envelopes to the post office to make it happen. So yeah, we could talk about the old school politic days. And thank God they're gone, because trust me, I have more than my share of paper cuts. But in my experience in doing that, I've run all kinds of campaigns, local campaigns, statewide campaigns, national campaigns, federal campaigns, pretty much all kind of campaigns. And the reality is my favorite kind of campaign to run is working with new candidates. And why do I love new candidates? Because new candidates usually run because they see a void in the marketplace. What does that mean? It means they see, they look at their government and they say, you know what? This point of view is not being represented. They look at their marketplace and they say, I wish we had somebody at the city council who represented my point of view, or who represented what I wanted to see done. And I like getting those people elected, because I think our government is better when we have a wide variety of perspectives and points of view, when we have people from all different backgrounds doing all kinds of different things and bringing those perspectives into our government. And so that's why I started Real People Elected, because despite the fact that people hate politicians, and they do, and what's not to hate? They're pretty horrible people if you think about it sometimes. But the reality is that we can do better, and we can do better if we decide to run. So in January, I'm going to be launching this new service campaign about how real people get elected. And I've named it Real People Elected. I actually did a nice little poll on Facebook and Twitter, and it was really close between Real People Elected and We Represent Us. And I had a great idea by one of my friends who posted that said, hey, you can actually put those things together. And so this year I'm focusing on candidates and campaign operatives, and going to be providing all kinds of clues and tips and helps around campaigns and campaign operatives. But later in the year, we're going to launch a piece that's just for activists. And we're going to use We Represent Us for our activist work. So today we're talking candidates, and I bet, and I see a couple of people have joined us. Thank you for joining. Probably many of you folks that are watching this, hopefully you maybe had in the back of your mind thought, yeah, I could run for that. I could be that. I'm going to focus primarily on local elections, and there's a couple of truths about most local elections. The first thing is, number one is local elections usually are part-time positions, which means you can serve as a local elected official, local electeds being like school board or county council or city council. Yes, Nakia, I don't know how I'm more tech savvy than you, but I can teach you because it's really simple. It could be county commissioner, but it's those things that are very local to your area. And most of the time in most jurisdictions, those are part-time positions. Some of them are volunteer positions and some of them are paid positions, but they're still part-time positions. The reason that that's important to understand is because as an entry-level candidate, that means that you still get to maintain ties with your family, which I think is so important. You still have the opportunity to work a job, and particularly if you're an entrepreneur, and I hope many of you are. I believe in entrepreneurship. I definitely do that for myself. Then that allows you to still maintain a business relationship. And most importantly, it allows you to start out your career in politics, or maybe just your service in politics, working on issues that are close to home. So that's the kinds of races that I'm going to be primarily focused on. It doesn't mean that many of this advice are the same things that you would do whether you were running for school board or whether you were running for Congress. A lot of these things are the same concept, but we're going to focus in on those smaller races. So what are some of the big questions that you get when you're thinking about running for office? First of all, one big question is, am I qualified? Well, you know, let me just say, and I'll give you the spoiler alert now, it really does not take much to be qualified to run for most of these offices. Under the law, let's take the President of the United States, for example. Under the law, to run for President of the United States, you really only have 3 conditions. I bet most people didn't even realize that, but you only have to be a natural born citizen, okay? You have to be 35 years old, okay? And you have to be a resident for at least 14 years. But other than that, you can run for president. And to be honest, most local offices and any political offices, as far as the law is concerned, the barrier to entry and the qualification for being able to run is very, very low. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that that's all you need in order to convince voters to convince that you're the right person to run. And to do that, you need a few other things. You need to think about things like message. What am I going to say to voters? You need to think about things like, what are my values and what do I stand for? You need to think about what kind of change would I like to bring to my community, and how does this office help me facilitate that change? So there's all of these things that you think about. And, you know, interestingly enough, the number one question that I get from most people that candidates have the hardest time answering, that definitely requires an answer, is really a simple one. And it is, why are you running? You would be surprised how many people who are running for public office cannot answer the question of why they are running. And so one of the very first things that I do when I sit down with candidates is say, why are you running? And do you understand why you're running? And can you communicate that to voters? Thanks, Brenda, for joining. She says she thinks the biggest issue is that she sees people have financial backing, but no real qualifications. Yeah, so that's absolutely true. That happens. Definitely money is a big thing in politics, and I've spent a lot of time talking about fundraising and budget. That's also actually one of the reasons that people run, is because they see that folks have who are representing, if you will, the 1%ers are getting in office, and the folks that are representing, you know, ordinary working people are not getting in office. And there are some things that you can do to overcome that. The reality is that in order to talk to voters, you absolutely need money. And we spend a lot of time talking about how to fundraise. You know, the big barrier that most candidates have, quite honestly, as it relates to fundraising, is they just don't want to ask people for money. It's a really difficult task. But we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how you can ask people for money, why it's important to ask people for money, and some tips and strategies on how to do it most effectively. And to be honest with you, for some of these campaigns, particularly at the state and local level, you don't need as much money as you think in order to get it done. You can get it done on very, very little. So let's go back and talk about some of the things that you need in order to run for office. So we've talked a little bit about qualifications, but let's start with something more valuable. I have kind of like 4 questions that I ask people to ask themselves when they're thinking about running for office. One, of course, we've already talked about, which is, why are you running? Why is it important for you to be a candidate? What do you hope to get out of it? The second is, and this really goes to the campaign itself, and that is, how much time will you have to run your campaign? You know, on average, campaigns take 6 to 8 months, and they require a significant amount of time, upwards of 30 hours plus a week, in order to have time to do the fundraising, to meet with voters, to answer questionnaires, to get out and let people know that you're running. And so you have to be ready to spend that time doing those activities. Here's another question. I'm going to tell you, you cannot run a campaign by yourself. Campaigns are a team sport, which means everybody you know needs to get involved. So before you make that decision to decide to run for office, make sure that you've had honest conversations with your family and your friends about what you're doing, why you're doing, and really get them on board and get their support. You know, as a person who's managed campaigns, one of the very first things that I do when I'm meeting with a candidate before they even hire me is that I want to sit down not only with them as a candidate, but I want to sit down with their family members, and particularly their spouses. Sometimes spouses are seen as a little bit of a cliche in politics, but the reality is that if you don't have the support of your spouse in running a campaign, it really makes it 2, 3, 4 times more difficult than it needs to be. Reason being is because, one, campaigns take time, which means time that you may not have available for the family during that specific point. It is incredibly demanding to be a candidate, and unfortunately, it does have a negative impact on the family. 2, financial. If you're running a campaign, that may mean that things that you're doing to earn money to make sure that your bills are paid are not getting done. So as a family, you need to talk about the financial impact that it could have. Here's another thing. You know, you need to, and this is not just about just the wife, but also if you have children, because again, it may take away from the time that you have been used to spending with them. For instance, maybe you have a kid that plays soccer and they play soccer on Wednesdays, but you're going to find that those Wednesdays, especially evenings, are getting compromised because you need to go to a neighborhood meeting, or maybe you have a speech that you need to give. And I'm not suggesting that politics is more important than family. I'm just suggesting, and just keeping it real with you, that when you are a candidate, there's a lot of demands on your time, and that will have a negative impact on the amount of time you have available to spend with your family. One of the things I do when I sit down with candidates initially is talk to them about that, and let's say, okay, well, let's carve out when we're going to make sure that we have family time, because family time is important. And so frequently throughout the campaign, we have what I call protected spaces to make sure that good candidates continue to have the support of their families, and particularly their spouses and their children, because they've done what they need to do and prepared their families for that. You know, another big thing is, quite honestly, families have a major role to play in campaigns. The truth is that we trust people who are trusted by their family members. And when we see wives and spouses and kids out having a good time, we see that as an indicator of someone who has those trustworthy qualities that we look for in good candidates. And so being able to share a little bit of how you are in your family role during your campaign and during your candidacy is important. But of course, we want to also be respecting privacy of people who are not part of the campaign necessarily. And so figuring out how to do that and when to do that and when it makes sense is a big part of it. Here's another thing to consider. Consider your finances. Campaigns do cost money. And there are many, many candidates who run who frankly kick in a part of their own money. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but it is a reality. Sometimes candidates loan money to their campaigns. Sometimes they're paying for things out of pocket. But even if this isn't true for the kind of campaign you can run, or that's not something you can afford, that doesn't mean that you can't win and be successful. What it means is that there has to be a plan for how you are going to pay for those things that happen in your campaign. And more than likely, particularly if you work a job, it's important for you to have a conversation with your employer about the fact that you're getting ready to run for a couple of reasons. One, because if there are extra things that you've done, it may impact your time at work. Two, they need to know that your profile in the community and in the public space is going to be raised. And depending on who you work for and your role in that kind of organization, it may impact whether or not they can be supportive or not. Sadly, I have had candidates that haven't shared with their employers that they're planning to run for an elected position, and then they found themselves in campaigns and unfortunately terminated from their employer. So I don't want that to happen. I'm sure you don't want that to happen. And so communication about what you're doing and what you need to do early before you even decide to run is super important. Okay, so we've talked about 3 or 4 things, but I'm about to tell you one of the most important things. And this one may seem obvious, but you would be surprised how many people get caught up in this very thing. Okay, it's simple. It's only 3 words, but it's one of the most critical things that you need to do to prepare yourself for candidacy. You ready? Okay, here it is. Pay your taxes. That's right, you gotta have your taxes paid. It's one of the main things that people look at. Again, it goes to show your relationship with your government and with your and how you participate in government. And how can you be a person who will oversee what happens with tax dollars when you haven't even paid your own tax dollars. It just doesn't work out very well. And I have seen many of really good quality candidates go down because they've had issues with their taxes. Now, these are issues that can be overcome. We certainly have elected people who owe taxes but may be on payment plans or may have done some other things, but honestly, you really need to have your taxes under control. And so as you're thinking about running for office, that's one of the most important things that you need to focus on, particularly for the jurisdiction that you may be running for. So what do I mean by that? So you're running for school board. What tax dollars pay for your schools? In most jurisdictions, those are property taxes, which means if you're interested in running for school board, you need to have your property taxes paid. Let's say you're running for city council. You may have a income tax or business tax related to the city that needs to be paid. In any case, whatever tax corresponds to the office that you might be most interested in running for, you need to make sure it's paid. Okay, so we've talked a lot about sort of, are you ready to run? And I'll review those questions really quickly. The first is, why are you running? What do you want to accomplish? The second is, will you have time to run your campaign? The third is, do you have the support of your family and friends? The next is, consider your finances. And the final is, pay your taxes. Well, that's just a little bit about what it takes to run for office. These things that we focused on today are those personal questions. These are the questions that you don't want to be asking yourself when you're in the middle of a campaign. You want to already have those things answered and have a quick response to and have dealt with this before you even really decide to run. We're going to talk a little bit next week about things like, are you qualified, and do you know your district, and some other things, because we're going to be doing these little chats about once a week to kind of just get people thinking about, what it takes to run for office. So today we really wanted to focus on those pre-candidate kinds of things. What do you need to run for office? Are you ready to run? Do you know why you're running? And those kinds of things. Next time we talk, we'll be talking more about digging into more how you put your actual campaign together and some of the important things about that. And in coming weeks, what you can look forward to is a real honest dialogue about campaigns and what it takes. We'll be dealing with things that are important for not just candidates, but also people who run campaigns. We've had a lot of people join while I've been talking. Thank you so much. This was my first Facebook Live. There are going to be many, many more to come, and I hope you all join. Please feel free to share this with friends. Like my page on Facebook at Holiday Advisors. That's HOLLIDAY Advisors on Facebook. In January, we'll be releasing our little book. It's actually a shook. I just found that out. It's going to be a short book, very digestible and available on our website, which will also be launching in January, Real People Elected. So these are just some little previews. Wanted to make sure that we're kind of putting out there kind of what's going on. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm trying to do what I can, girl, hanging in there. But I just want to, again, thank you all for joining. We'll do these little 20 to 25 minute slices. And then once we, and if you're interested in more information, starting in, I want to do 2 quick plugs because, got to sell something. The first plug is in March 3rd and 4th, we're going to be doing a candidate intensive. That'll be for candidates and campaign operatives, 2 days with me and some of the best experts around the country, really digging into and working with you to put together your campaign. Not these typical trainings where we give you this model and then you go and you work the model. No, we want you to come and think, and we want to be able to help you put together your campaign. So in those 2 days, we're not going to just be working on models. We're going to be working on things that you need to do to put together your campaign. And then for those who can't make it to DC, or maybe you just want to keep in touch with me, or maybe you want to do some one-on-one stuff, we're going to be offering a monthly subscription program that will allow you to keep in contact with me, get advice from me on the fly. I'll be available by email and messenger, and also I'll do one hour phone conversation consultation per month if you decide to join our Real People Elected membership group. So I just want to thank you all for this. Thank you, Brenda, for the encouragement. I'm so glad you could join. If you're joining us late, feel free to play back. I want to be true to my commitment to keep these things tight and informative. More to come next week, so I'll see you this time next Thursday, 4:00 p.m. We'll be doing something very similar, but on a slightly different topic. Here, we are always talking about getting real people elected and having real people in office. Feel free to hit me up on Messenger or Facebook if there's something specific you want me to talk about, and I'll be sure to work that in. Thanks for listening. Bye.